Hello, and welcome to my review of Scream, aka Scream 5, I guess. So, this is the Corruptive Chaos channel, and I'm Corbin. And, seemingly January's only big release in Scream has arrived to theaters. And, well, how good or bad was it?
Hello, Sidney. It's an honor.
As I said, this was the 5th entry into the Scream franchise, and for the first time, it actually was not helmed by Wes Craven, who sadly passed away in 2015. A lot of people, probably including myself, not to give too much away, thought that the Scream franchise should probably have ended if Wes Craven's involvement was no longer able to happen. Unfortunately, Hollywood has called back again to get these actors from decades prior back in another sequel or whatever this is to go for another.
Hello?
It's happening. 3 attacks so far. Something about this one just feels different.
But with that said of Wes Craven, I really am not a huge fan at all of the Scream franchise. I think the whodunit aspect never really works for me. The fact that the killer from film to film changes, you have the iconic look of Ghostface, no doubt, but you don't have the person behind the mask consistently throughout film to film. Of course, the whole point of every film, at least to get to that final bit of the third act in every film, is to figure out just who the killer is. But with my sort of lukewarm reception or even dislike of the Scream franchise, I think 2 major things are obviously above the fray compared to other genre films from the era that those first few Scream films were made. Scream, of course, released in 1996. Its sequel, shortly released thereafter, less than a year, in 97. Scream 3, the black sheep of the franchise, released in 2000. And then you jump up quite a bit with Wes Craven's Scream 4 in 2011. While we're on the subject of Scream 4, I think that film did what Scream 5 set out to do far better. I think it commented on the state of sequels and the slog that the horror genre is in, where you're stuck in this state of sequelitis, or reboots or remakes or whatever. You're getting the same thing over and over again, and I think Scream 4 actually cleverly, I dare say, did a good job of commenting on those aspects. Now, was it a clever film on its own? I don't know about that, but I think it was good at commenting on the genre and the state of Hollywood at the time. And really, Scream 5, over a decade later, attempts kind of to do the same thing. One character even dubs this new term, which I think could be used appropriately to describe this film, which is a requel, which is a reboot sequel.
Samantha? I know who you are. I've been through this a lot. This is your life now, which means that whoever this is going to keep coming for you. You ready for this? Never.
Ever since Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, that's when this sort of soft reboot / sequel phase really took off. We've now seen it in the new Ghostbusters film, Ghostbusters Afterlife last year, and the Halloween reboot from 2018, sort of, where you get back these actors that everyone identifies with and that they have identified with potentially for decades. But then, you don't make people think that it's really a sequel by just calling it Scream or Halloween, and then that allows you to create accessibility for your film for newer audiences, for people who are, in their late teens, early 20s, who maybe haven't gotten around to seeing all of the sequels in these various franchises. And really, I do think you could probably jump into Scream 5 without having seen any of the previous films, but you're probably more benefited by seeing those first 4. But the thing is with Scream, I think every script thinks it's far more clever than it really is. One of the writers on this film was a writer on Ready or Not, which is the creative team. Both of the directors directed Ready or Not, and one of the writers wrote it or co-wrote it. And special shout out to Samara Weaving, star of that film. Great star in really kind of a lukewarm script that, once again, thinks it's a really clever twist on the horror genre, when in reality it's kind of just doing the same tropes that we've seen for decades. And this slasher is no different.
Hello?
Hello.
Who is this?
You tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
This isn't funny, Amber.
Would you like to play a game, Tara?
It thinks that it's a cool twist on the horror and slasher genre, when really things just evolve into the same antics that we saw, maybe 40 years ago in the boom of slashers. I mean, the characters in this, what really bothers me is that a lot of the characters are just as dumb as maybe characters were 40 years ago. And, just like the characters in the film or in the original Scream, they're yelling at the TV, sort of engaging with the film that they're watching for characters to get out of the house or to look behind you, when they don't do that themselves, which for a lot of people may be funny, but I think that the tone of Scream, every Scream, is more serious, in that it's actually trying to do something clever with this genre spin. And while I'm pretty lukewarm with the Scream franchise, hey, I love Wes Craven. I think, if you're looking for a better slasher franchise, go check out A Nightmare on Elm Street. And frankly, if you're wanting to check out a meta horror film, I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which he wrote, and which Wes Craven did not write the Scream films. 3 of the 4 of the first 4 have been written by Kevin Williamson, who, I personally prefer his film that he wrote, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which has now become sort of a slasher classic in its own right, of those post-Scream slashers. But when it comes to Wes Craven, yeah, like I was saying, go check out New Nightmare. It's a really interesting meta take on Freddy Krueger and slashers in general, just like Scream attempts to be anyway. And another thing with these requels is that you want to see those old characters come back, those legacy characters as they're dubbed in this. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette. I think they genuinely gave great performances in all 4 of the previous films, which is something, not every slasher can say. A lot of slasher performances are well below par, but that's not usually the reason you're going. You're going there for the gore, but it's a nice addition to have those 3 actors really shine here. They seem to really actually enjoy being back to the Scream franchise. And, none of those 3 really phone it in. And while, like I've said, I'm not a huge fan of the Scream franchise, I think the character connections between Gale Weathers and Dewey, played by Courtney Cox and David Arquette respectively, is my favorite part about the films.
There's certain rules to surviving.
The attacks were all on people related to the original killers. Whatever his link is to our past, it's pulled us all back here.
There have been some moments, spoiler alert, I guess, for some of the previous films, but there have been some close calls where Dewey comes, really close to death, or he's been stabbed and you assume he's dead, but he still comes back for the next sequel, or you see him rolled into an ambulance at the end of a film. And those three are really lovable, but the thing is, they have to share screen time with these new actors who take up a lot of the screen time. So instead of developing this one group of characters, which really you have an ensemble and then a trio, with the ensemble being the new actors, the teens, you're splitting your time, and neither group really seems to get proper character justice or character development. And that's a real shame, but it benefits the trio of legacy actors because we already know and maybe love them, depending on if you like this franchise.
And I won't sleep until he's in the ground.
So, now let's get to the gore. This is a slasher. Most people who love slashers are going to watch them because of the kills. They want to see, in some ways, the slasher villain succeed or totally succeed. I mean, some slashers are totally nonchalant about, the hatred that people might have for their group of characters that will get inevitably killed off one by one. And here, the gore is serviceable. It's not great. I think the Ghostface Killer, another big critique of this franchise, is that the Ghostface Killer is just too repetitive and becomes dull eventually. The Ghostface Killer just has a knife. Most of the kills are done with a knife. And the encounters with Ghostface are always kind of comical to me because Ghostface is like the most human killer. So you can push them down, whoever they are. But they usually get right back up. Whereas in Friday the 13th, The Nightmare on Elm Street, or Halloween, the three big slasher franchises, you might have really inventive kills, creative fantasy-esque kills even, just brutal force kills. But here, with a knife, things aren't all that interesting. And I think the film, as a slasher, suffers from that if you're a genre fan. Additionally, I do think there were some unwarranted digital effects. The blood usually looks surprisingly good, I would say. But I think when the knife is stabbing some parts of the body, or it goes through not to spoil any kills, but when it goes through a piece of the body, it sometimes needs to be a digital effect instead of, mixing prosthetics. There have been better makeup effects in the previous Scream films. Another mention, while we're on the subject of digital effects, a maybe dead character does return in a vision format. But, I'm personally, whenever I see a character come back and then get digitally de-aged, it always looks weird. It's not a huge part of the plot. It doesn't come up very often. But if that sort of thing bothers you like it does me, it's just so distracting. If you bring back an actor, just use makeup as best you can to make them look younger, if that's the point. Otherwise, whoever, just let them be their age. And the audience will believe that more than they do any sort of CGI or digital de-aging of the face, which always makes it look a little wonky. So, while I wasn't a huge fan of this film, really in the slightest, I did think the performances by our three returning characters were great. Our ensemble, I really didn't connect with any of the characters that are new entries into the Scream franchise. They might become mainstays. Who knows if a sequel will happen? I mean, even if a slasher franchise seems done in the most concrete way, who knows? So if I were to give this a rating, I would give it a 1.5 out of 5 stars. I know, not very high in the slightest. I just think that things get repetitive, and we're going back to the same locations that we've already seen in Scream before. The killer brings nothing new, the script brings nothing new, there's no cleverness. The murder mystery, if you connect with that, great. I didn't. I'd give this kind of a harsh recommendation not to go see it in theaters. It is the only big release of January 2022, seemingly. But I suppose if you're a fan of the Scream franchise or a fan of slashers, I will say I'm at least a fan of slashers, so there's that. But, if you fit into that category, I'd say you'll probably enjoy this. I think most horror fans will actually enjoy this simply because you're seeing some okay visuals with some okay kills, and people like the Scream franchise regardless of what I think. So it'll probably get decent reviews. I'm sure the horror community will rave over it, but personally, I couldn't connect with it in the slightest. I think it's technically well made, but it's all for nothing. So, thank you all for watching my first review. Be sure to check out the channel for more, and I'll see you later.